the COVID experience has transformed the company, accelerated our development in so many ways, and of course also brought with it the benefit of significant cash, which now we can reinvest.
I think this was the reason why the share price also improved in the last weeks or months by kind of 40%, is because people realize this is something which could be very big.
This is a capability to produce a product for an individual patient that's specifically tailored to their own tumor. This is, we think, really exciting, and we think it's going to be a key trend that's going to help, it's going to redefine cancer treatment over the next 15 to 20 years.
Can you offer a competitive pricing structure for these individualized therapies so that it can be widely used by patients? In the financial market, there's the concern that you will show losses at some point of time. Now, do you expect losses? Warm welcome to everybody outside, especially to Ryan Richardson from BioNTech. I'm extremely excited about the opportunity we have, because I know you have that much to do in the moment. It's Capital Markets Day, it's AI Market Day, it's Results Day, it's whatever it is in the last weeks. And it's such interesting times. And I highly appreciate that you made it to us and to our viewers. Ryan, warm welcome to you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Andreas. It's great to be with you.
Before I start, I see you, the BioNTech as a company with three pillars. And one pillar is, of course, the vaccines business and most prominent corona vaccine. So we'll focus on that. The second pillar is, of course, oncology, and that's maybe the most thrilling one. I say it later on again, but you have the vision to cure cancer. And we will touch upon that, what it means, how it can be achieved, what is the time frame for that. And then I would say you have a third pillar, and that's the bank with with 18 billion or so on bank accounts. You are a little bank, and we will discuss what is now. The background is why we can also include the bank is because you are a banker. And my question is a little bit, we discussed before, did we meet in London? It could have been because I was a lead analyst in two IPOs, and you were in London in the investors community, deeply involved and deeply included. And we haven't met. I don't think so, but it could have been. But what is maybe something personal? What is a banker doing in a pharma company, in a biotech company? Why is that? This is not the usual thing. What is your role? Maybe you can explain a little bit about the special approach BioNTech has.
Yeah, absolutely, Andreas. Happy to speak to those things. So you're right. I spent about almost 9 years in the investment banking field, in healthcare and biotech specifically, before coming to BioNTech. And actually, before entering the banking field, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry and in consulting in the pharmaceutical industry. So in total, I've spent well over 20 years in the industry, and just under half of that was in banking. And I came to BioNTech in 2018, having worked already with Uğur and Özlem and our chairman. On their first company, Ganymed. So actually, as a banker, I worked on the sale of Ganymed to Astellas in 2016, got to know them, got to understand their passion for innovation and for science. And I was very impressed with both the founders and the broader team behind BioNTech. And so when they asked me to come on board and help them with the IPO, for me, that was really a unique opportunity for me to leverage the skill set that I had developed over the previous 15 plus years towards one of the most exciting companies that I had come across as a banker in all of Europe, and actually even globally. And it had been my job in banking to actually get to know very promising young biotechnology companies and try to help them on their path to one day going public and raising capital to fuel innovation. And so I think, the heart of the answer to your question really is, it starts with access to capital. One of the biggest challenges for even very promising biotechnology companies is how do they access the risk capital to be able to develop the innovations that ultimately are going to hopefully transform medicine. And I think that's a challenge for every biotechnology company, right? These are typically companies that don't have revenue. So they need to be able to convince investors early on, get them on board on their vision. I think fortunately for BioNTech, we had a very strong set of founding shareholders that had been with the company since inception, and the Strungman brothers, MIG Funds, and others. And that was really helpful to give the company this sort of long-term vision and basically provide a pathway for Ugur and Özlem and the founders to realize their vision. So my role in that initially was to try to help access capital markets, because we recognized that the company had this big vision to transform medicine, to individualize cancer therapy. And that was going to require capital, right? So that's kind of where it all started. And so I joined in 2018. We did an IPO on NASDAQ in 2019. It was a challenging time in the market, but we were able to list successfully. And that proved to be really important for the next stage of the company's development, which was the COVID-19 vaccine program, actually, which we launched in January of 2020, only a couple months after the IPO. And of course, that the COVID experience has transformed the company, accelerated our development in so many ways, and of course also brought with it the benefit of significant cash, which now we can reinvest towards the next wave of growth for the company.
Great, and in a way, you must feel like Wonderland because you have full pockets, and you can do deals. Transformational deals, AI or whatever it is. We come to touch on that a little bit later on. But the basis, as you said, was the COVID vaccines business. And maybe we touch on that just a little bit in short. One thing is, of course, what is the kind of constant revenue and profit you expect from the Corona franchise, from COVID franchise?
So the COVID franchise, of course, has reset as we've moved out of the pandemic and into more of an endemic market setting. And obviously the revenues have come down. But I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is this sort of stabilization in terms of vaccine demand, right? So I think what's clear to us now, having had multiple seasons of COVID-19 booster shots globally, is that this is going to be likely to be continue to be a market. There's going to continue to be a need for COVID-19 vaccine boosters. Today, that's primarily focused on the adult, sort of the senior populations, and also the immunocompromised. And we're seeing vaccine rates between sort of 15 to 20% range in many of the Western countries. And we've seen that now consistently for the last couple of seasons. And so we think that that's likely to continue in terms of there being a need for vaccines to continue to protect against the fight against COVID. And, if you look at the data in terms of COVID-related hospitalizations and COVID-related deaths, we see that there still is a significant morbidity associated with COVID-19. And we think that repeated vaccines can be a tool for health systems and for individuals to help protect themselves if they wish that extra protection. So I think revenue-wise, this year we've guided to 2.5 to 3.1 billion euros. We've indicated that we're likely to be on the lower end of that range for this season. And of course, again, that's going to depend primarily on the overall vaccination rate. But going forward, we do think that the vaccine demand overall in the market is likely to stay in a similar range to what we've seen.
And of course, the important question is, when can we expect from you a combination of flu and corona COVID vaccine? Because it would make it, on the one hand, easier to get a vaccination, and on the other hand, expanding the market, because the ones who get flu vaccine would get automatically also corona vaccine.
So we're working on it. We're working on the combination vaccine. We had we have an ongoing study or ongoing program that's in the earlier stage right now of a next gen COVID flu combination vaccine concept, and hopefully in 2025 we'll be able to provide more details. I think you're absolutely right that if successful, we do think that a combination vaccine could address the overlap that exists in terms of those patients, those people that would benefit most from continued protection every season. So I think that is one factor, that if combination vaccines are successful, that I think that could grow, could increase COVID vaccine demand. I think the other factor that we're looking at is, we've noticed that COVID epidemiology has actually not followed flu perfectly, right? So we've actually seen we've seen waves of COVID infections and related hospitalizations actually happen before the typical flu season. We've seen that certainly in 2024. We saw some of that also in 2023 across different countries. And so I think if that trend continues, I think there could also be a benefit to having earlier COVID vaccine availability. And I think that's, we have seen some shift to an earlier approval in 2024 versus 2023. We'll have to see how the epidemiology continues. If that pattern continues, I think that there could also be scope for enhanced access earlier in the season so that so many people don't get COVID before the vaccines even come out.
And it would be good for doctors and patients not to get everybody in October, November time, but a little bit, let's say in June, July, to get vaccinations there would make it easier as well. Now, switching over to the other vaccines, you are working on Mpox, monkeypox, as it was for. It's now a little bit a kind of more urgency on that as we have more and more cases. You are working on the bird flu, H5N1, which seems to be a thing. And now we have a new development in Congo and other African states with an unknown critical deaths. Is that something you can adjust the platform fast enough to get these kind of things done, and maybe even a vaccination in the areas in Congo or whatever to fabricate these mRNA-based vaccines? Is that something you could do or you do, let's say?
So absolutely. I think that the mRNA platform has the benefit of being very rapid to produce new constructs. So it takes us typically only a couple of weeks to produce a new vaccine construct if we have the target sequence in mind. And only on the back end of the production process, a couple additional weeks to actually roll it out of the production. So the process from start to finish can be extremely rapid for a whole host of diseases. Now, we have not announced a bird flu program yet. We do have an active monkeypox program. I would just note that there continue to be monkeypox cases. We see those still in Africa popping up and actually elsewhere as well. So our plan is to continue to advance our monkeypox program. We do think that there's an unmet need there and that our vaccine could make a difference. And we look forward to providing updates on monkeypox in the near future. And of course, beyond that, we do have an active early surveillance program where we do track diseases that could become, pandemic threats. And of course, in the preclinical setting, we do have a wide range of candidates that we work with so that we could rapidly respond if the need arises.
So investors, I think the message to me is should not forget the vaccine business. It's not just an add-on. It's an interesting standalone part, definitely. Now, switching nevertheless to oncology, which is the thrilling part, and we touched upon it. You have it was said in the Capital Markets Day or in the R&D Day, I should name it. And it's highly interesting. So everybody should listen into it. I think it's really interesting to hear that, but to see that. But one message for me was you are looking for disease-free survival. That's a new formulation. That's something new for the industry. In my words, it means you hope to cure cancer. Maybe you can just give a little bit this big picture before we start to dive in some products. But you talk about 5 transformational products, disruptive products. Why is that? What is the logic behind that?
Yeah, so at the founding of BioNTech, the vision was to try to develop novel technologies that could address the heterogeneity of cancer. And the basic premise was that, was founded on the idea that the cancers are different at the molecular level, at the genetic level, and also that cancers have this ability to mutate around. So even if you target a specific mutation or a type of cell, oftentimes cancers can just evade that and come back in an even more deadly form. And so, Uğur and Özlem's vision was to develop novel platforms that could address those two fundamental factors. And so, fast forward to today, we still carry that vision with us today. And actually, we're seeing that now manifest in terms of actual products in the BioNTech portfolio. And at the fundamental basis of that portfolio strategy at BioNTech is predicated on three basic kinds of drugs, right? We've got immunomodulators, we have mRNA cancer vaccines, and then we have targeted therapies. And we think that bringing these different modes of action together, sometimes in combination, is actually going to be one of the ways that we advance the field of cancer treatment and actually create the potential for curative approaches. So you talked about disease-free survival there. We think one of the ways that we can advance the field is indeed to bring these different mechanisms of action, unique abilities to harness the power of the immune system through novel immunomodulators like BNT327, coupled with ways to target therapies such as our ADC portfolio provides across a range of programs. And we highlighted a few of those at the Innovation Day, such as BNT323, which is one of our most advanced ADCs. And then, of course, also cancer vaccines. And there we have the personalized and also the off-the-shelf, so iNeST and FixVac platforms, which utilize a similar RNA backbone, but to target different classes of antigens. In the case of the personalized, we're going after the individual mutations in each patient's tumor. Those are called neoantigens. With the FixVac approach, we're going after shared antigens that groups of patients with specific tumor types often have expressed. And so it's that combination of modalities, I think, that really differentiates BioNTech's approach. And we think that's going to open up an exciting new wave of therapy for cancer patients in the years ahead.
As I'm not a doctor or a scientist, maybe is it correct to summarize it in a way? Let's say you have a three-step approach. One step would be to treat it with conventional but new medicines, of course. The second step is then to have the residual cells found by mRNA vaccination so that they can destroy the residual cells, which they come like you have in many cancers. In the next 5 years, residual cells reoccur. And if the body is prepared for these cells, with the T cells, they can attack these cells very early, and so they don't develop into cancers again. Is that a correct description? Let's say.
Yeah, I think yes, that's a fair description. So, in particular, for our personalized cancer vaccines, iNeST, the treatment setting we think is really important because we know we have a lot of data that supports the mechanism of action, whereby these vaccines activate the immune system in very targeted ways and create a very strong T cell response. And what we found is actually that, and what we believe as well, based on the evidence, is that the best setting for that type of modality is indeed in the early setting, in the early adjuvant or neoadjuvant setting. And we've started now 3 different adjuvant trials in 3 different tumor types. The most advanced is in adjuvant colorectal cancer. And as you describe, the idea here is that after surgery, when the tumor mass has been removed, but you still have the high likelihood of having residual tumor cells left in the patient, the idea is to intervene with the vaccine at that point, create that strong T cell army, so to speak, that immune response that's tumor specific, with the aim of mopping up those residual tumor cells before they can reconstitute and grow and expand back into a tumor. And so the primary measure that we're looking at there is called recurrence-free survival. So it's, the patient's already been cleared of most of the tumor cells, but again, they're at high risk of it coming back. And the early data for this modality in the adjuvant setting looks very promising. We've seen in the pancreatic cancer setting, for example, evidence that, first of all, that the cancer vaccine can induce a T cell response that has, on a specific patient level, the ability to mop up those residual cells, actually eviscerate micro lesions. We've seen that now in anecdotal cases. And we've also seen that translate in adjuvant pancreatic cancer into a survival benefit, albeit in a small population. And so the current wave of studies that we have running in adjuvant colorectal cancer, adjuvant pancreatic cancer, and most recently adjuvant bladder cancer, the aim of those studies, of course, will be to replicate those very promising early results in much larger randomized studies. And that's the phase that we're entering now. And we aim to have our first adjuvant readout of data, phase 2 data, by the end of 2025 or early 26.
Great. Now, let's dive into the most, and I think this is BNT 327. This is one of the, let's say, traditional products with new approach, of course. I think this was the reason why the share price also improved in the last weeks or months by kind of 40%, is because people realize this is something which could be very big. Now, it is a so-called VEGF blocker, and it cuts the blood supply of the cancer cells, if I get it right, and starving to death, let's say. Now, in my old times, there was one product, Avastin, which was this kind of first mechanism of product. But Avastin has a really narrow indication level, only a few cancer types which could be treated with. And then came Keytruda from Merck, which has a similar factor, but is kind of $25 billion plus product, the biggest in the world, and everybody got thrilled about it, as you have something in that direction. Now, is your product, BNT 327, more towards Avastin-like or more Keytruda-like?
Yeah, great question. So I think what's so exciting about BNT 327 is actually it's both. It's both. And this is a bispecific antibody that targets both the PD-L1, so similar to the PD-1, PD-L1 class of therapies that you mentioned, but it also targets VEGF-A. So it has that. On one hand, we know both of these are mechanisms of action, right, that are validated in the cancer field, as you said, across multiple indications. And we believe that there's also evidence now that they're synergistic in terms of how they can work together. So what this bispecific antibody does is it localizes the VEGF activity to the tumor. PD-L1's bound on tumor cells. And so we get this, we're seeing this evidence of this unique mechanism of action working here that kind of brings the sort of strengths from both sides of the spectrum. And as you point out, on the anti-VEGF side, indeed, we do expect to have anti-angiogenesis or sort of effects, so starving the tumor, right? Even better if you can localize that effect to the tumor. But in addition to that, there's also pretty significant evidence that VEGF plays a broader role in cancer across the whole cancer immunity cycle. We know from other companies' work and studies in the field that VEGF also can play a role in terms of T cell trafficking to the tumor, and it can also play a role in a number of other processes across the cancer immunity cycle. So we think this antibody is unique in that it has both sort of dual aspect function, and the early clinical data would support that, would support a very promising profile here. So we're seeing broad spectrum activity, both in combination with chemotherapy, but also as a monotherapy in a wide range of tumor types. We've put out publicly data already in 6 different tumor types. Of course, we're studying many more tumor types, and I expect over the next 12 months or so, we're going to have certainly multiple additional data sets. In fact, we actually have data this week that's coming out at San Antonio, the breast conference, that's going to show some the first survival data. Abstracts have already been published, so I can mention it here, but very encouraging early survival benefit data for this bispecific antibody. And so, taking a step back here, we think that this is an antibody that could serve as a sort of next generation IO molecule. It could be a backbone across a wide variety of therapies. And of course, while more data is needed, our plan here is to accelerate the development plan for 327, starting first with chemo combinations, and then from there expanding into other combinations, including potentially with ADCs.
And if I may add, the chemo combination with an ADC is the benefit is that it's transporting the chemotherapeutics directly to the tumor cells. So it's a double combination. One is the B-specific antibody, which helps, and the other is the chemotherapeutics, which dock directly to the tumor cells. That may be something which is benefit from your approach you have in there. Now, we have heard in the capital market day, in the R&D day, that you have progression-free survival. And usually that's not an endpoint which is accepted by regulators anymore. In old times, yes, but now not anymore. But the hint was, and you said it a little bit, is that overall survival is pretty much expected as a result of progression-free survival. Is that something you could confirm or could say?
So that it's a great question. So indeed, in the early data sets, we've seen very strong response rates, and we've also seen promising early data, still single arm, but promising data on the progression-free survival side. And I think you rightly point out that what the field's really also waiting to understand is what's the translation to overall survival. And I think that's going to be something that we learn much more about over the course of next year. We are optimistic here at BioNTech based on the data that we see and the trends that we're seeing. It's not definitive yet. We don't have yet the full median OS overall survival data in, but the early signs suggest to us that there is likely to be here a benefit on overall survival. And just as a case in point, the data set I referenced, the abstract that was became public over the last few days, already shows us some very promising survival rates at 18 months in the TNBC, first-line TNBC population that we're studying this molecule in. This is the data that's being published here. It's going to be discussed in the coming days at a medical meeting. And I think that's, while it's not yet definitive, I think that it's very promising initial sign that we may have a strong translation. So I think ultimately we're going to have to see the full data sets to draw those, to confirm definitively. But I think so far, it looks very promising.
And you must be, because you made a deal buying your partner, BioNTech, or how you spell it in English. I think the purchase price was pretty low. Why did you make, if that was all turns out to be true, what you said, the hopes you have on BNT327, it seems pretty cheap. How you manage that? Is it a good banker's deal, let's say? And why you bought BioNTech?
Yeah, so we did the licensing deal with BioNTech last year in Q4, early Q4. We announced the licensing deal where we took global rights, but BioNTech kept China rights and also had a right to milestone payments up to over $1 billion and also tiered double-digit royalties. And so, the fundamental rationale for this deal was, given the data that's been coming in for the 327 program, which again continues to look very promising, was we wanted to be able to accelerate the program. And we think that taking full control of the program is going to better allow us to do that, to really accelerate towards the market in multiple indications, to be able to pursue combination therapies very quickly and robustly. So I think the deal was a win-win for both parties. Frankly, I think that it was good for both sides. I think that the deal is I would say straight down the middle of the fairway, to use a golf term, in terms of the strategy of BioNTech. Because I think we do see such great potential for this asset. So I think that I think it was a good deal for everybody there. The other benefits of the deal, of course, is that it's going to give us a China-based team. As well, that's going to also accelerate our clinical trial programs overall. China is an important contributor to global clinical trials, and so that's going to help us on the clinical side. We also take control of the manufacturing side upon conclusion of the deal, and I think that's going to also be an advantage, having full control of the supply of drug product. Of course, our aim is to diversify the supply sources. That was always the strategy. That will continue to be the strategy. We don't want to be dependent only on China's supply, but I think in the near term, it's going to be an advantage to have full control of the whole value chain for this product. And then last but not least, with this acquisition, we also will get a pipeline of other assets.
Exactly. Yeah.
Developed. We think we've been very impressed with BioNTech. We think they're one of the best antibody engineering companies that we've come across. It's really a testament to the strength of the science that they have and the capabilities of their team. And we're really looking forward to making that unit in China a BioNTech R&D hub as well.
Great. Now, finally, on BNT 327, you're starting a phase 3 in 25. Is that correct? And when do you expect it kind of, if you don't get fast track and all that stuff, what is the normal road, and when could you be in the market with BNT 327?
Yeah, so we are planning to start multiple pivotal studies, and it's going to really depend indication by indication in terms of how we set those up. So we've indicated that the initial indications are will be small cell lung cancer, right, where we're planning a phase 2/3, TNBC, where we're planning to do a phase 2. We just started a global phase 2, and our intention is to start a phase 3 in 2025. And we've also just announced, or at least it's been listed on clinicaltrials.gov, a phase 2/3 in non-small cell lung cancer, which of course is the largest indication. And there we're taking an all-comers approach because we do think that the molecule could serve a very broad set of patients. So those are the first 3 indications that we've talked about. All would be combined with chemotherapy, but of course we're looking at additional indications. So 2025 is going to be a very important year in terms of news flow for this program, also in terms of expansion of the development program.
As we have Keytruda in the market, such a strong franchise, let's say, is there any chance for fast track approval in this with BNT 327 because it's well covered by existing brand?
So I think that there are going to be, we think, multiple opportunities, most likely to. Well, let's put it this way. I think that there is potential based on the data that we see to go where Keytruda has been successful and potentially be competitive there against established products like Keytruda, but also potentially to go even where PD-1, PD-L1 therapies have not been successful, given the profile that we're seeing for this drug. So that's what I think one of the things that makes this so exciting as a novel bispecific therapy. And so I think we're going to be exploring multiple avenues. And I wouldn't rule out the possibility of an accelerated approval. I think at this point, we want to be in a position that we could potentially bring this product to market sort of in the next couple of years. It's going to take a couple of years for these trials to be executed, but we think, certainly in the 2020s, 2028 onwards, that we think there could be opportunities for submissions.
Okay, let's switch to FixVac, the mRNA-based things. We touched already a little bit on it. If I phrase it correctly, it's not patient individualized, but it's tumor or indication specific, which is also kind of new approach in that. Now, one product which was set in the R&D day is BNT 112 against prostate cancer. It wasn't mentioned that often, but suddenly we heard about it kind of in a side sentence. It's the most advanced product. Is that something you would emphasize, or is there any other FixVacs which you said this is the most interesting part?
Yeah, so as you point out, FixVac is interesting because it is a novel cancer vaccine that is tailored to specific tumor antigens for specific tumor types. So we have a FixVac melanoma, we have a FixVac head and neck cancer or HPV positive cancers program. We have a FixVac in non-small cell lung cancer, and you've mentioned as well that we've also had a FixVac in prostate cancer and some other cancers. So in each of the FixVacs has a unique cocktail of antigens that are expressed in that particular tumor type. I think in terms of them, with multiple FixVacs are interesting, and I think it's in contrast to the individualized approach. So this is a off-the-shelf drug, so we can readily administer it. Right? It's an IV administered product. It's just a vial of RNA, so it's relatively simple. We don't need to individualize it. Low cost of goods. So this is the other end of the spectrum, right? But still utilizing some of the same cutting-edge mRNA backbone technology. And and I think what was really promising, or actually really exciting for us in 2024 this year, was we in our first randomized phase 2 study of a FixVac program, which was melanoma, BNT 111. we announced that we met our primary endpoint of overall response rate endpoint being met in a randomized trial where we combined fixed-back melanoma with Libtayo, which is Regeneron's PD-1 therapy. And we're looking forward to bringing out that full data in 2025. So that'll be something to look out for. I think 2025 will be an important year for our cancer vaccine platforms, both of them. iNeST, I've already mentioned, with CRC adjuvant data expected, but also fixed-back and melanoma, we expect that full data set to be released. And we'll provide at that time more information on next steps for the program. But I think on both cases, I think we're seeing very promising data coming in for the vaccine platforms.
Okay, and now to the most thrilling and newest approach is individualized treatment. I've seen the laboratories in Wiesbaden. Was impressed from the team and from the people. Maybe you can just elaborate a little bit on the background, how it's working, very short, and then we touch maybe on 111 or 122 with colorectal cancer, or specifically maybe on the pancreas area, because I think this was a proof of concept, but I don't know whether you would regard it as such a pivotal point in your research. Maybe just elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. Yeah, so the individualized RNA cancer vaccines are a modality that really are close to the BioNTech mission to treat the heterogeneity of cancer, right? But this is a new way of treating cancer that has not been available before, and that makes it very exciting. This is a therapy that relies on a number of steps. So the first step is that we take a tumor sample and we identify the mutanome, or the mutation signature of the tumor versus the healthy tissue of the patient. And then we use AI here systematically to select which mutations we want to target. And we use a set of algorithms for that. Fully in silico process, there's not human intervention at that stage. We use AI to select those mutations, and then we produce in our factories in Germany a individualized cancer vaccine therapy for the individual patient, right? And so this is a capability to produce a product for an individual patient that's specifically tailored to their own tumor. This is, we think, really exciting, and we think it's going to be a key trend that's going to help, it's going to redefine cancer treatment over the next 15 to 20 years. And we're also in a very exciting stage in terms of testing this modality, right? So we've been in the clinic now with some form of an individualized RNA vaccine for more than 10 years at BioNTech. So we really have been in this field a long time. We have a lot of data on the accumulated data on the safety profile, and of course on the efficacy and immunogenicity profile as well. And as you point out, we have a number of trials now in randomized phase 2 studies. So these are controlled studies where we have a higher level of internal validity, and we can actually really assess whether the vaccine can actually extend recurrence-free survival. That's the primary outcome that we're looking for in most of these studies. The most advanced study is indeed adjuvant colorectal cancer. And as I said, we're expecting some data at the end of 25, early 26 to inform us on the path forward. You mentioned pancreatic cancer, and that it's true that we had some very promising data that came out from a study that was done by Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in the United States. This was last year in adjuvant pancreatic cancer, where we observed that in those patients that had an immunogenic response measured, where we could actually detect a vaccine-induced neoantigen-specific T-cell response of high magnitude in the patient post-vaccination versus pre-vaccination. In those patients that were immunogenic responders, we had a statistically significant survival benefit. And that was very promising, I think, for the whole field. So while the study size was small, I think the survival benefit in those patients was very clear and very pronounced. And I think that's one of the reasons that we undertook then a much larger study in adjuvant pancreatic cancer. So, I think that this is a modality that we maintain high conviction in. I think it's one of the pillars of BioNTech and the BioNTech cancer portfolio. And it's also a modality that we're investing significantly behind because, this is a very novel, potentially disruptive modality. It requires its own factory, right? It requires investments in AI and in process engineering. And these are capabilities that you have to build because it's never really been done before. You can't just go out to a third-party service provider and get these services. So we're building that capability inside BioNTech. We're forming a sort of unit, end-to-end capability inside the company, investing heavily to scale up production so that if those studies are positive, we'll be able to bring these vaccines to more patients.
Now it's early days, and you don't have to be concrete, but gene therapies, for example, individualized therapies cost $1 million or $2 million or $4 million per patient. No health system could afford such expensive things for a broader usage, let's say. What is your thinking about it? Can you offer a competitive pricing structure for these individualized therapies so that it can be widely used by patients?
So we think with proper scale and focus on process efficiency, that these therapies can be rolled out to a very broad set of patients. And I'll just say that of course in the early stage the cost of goods is higher, right? But we think that we can bring that down with time, with greater scale, and we're making those investments in already today to try to improve on those aspects. So I won't talk about price specifically at this stage. I think at the end of the day, price will be linked to outcomes. But if we can show a meaningful survival benefit, especially in the early stage where patients generally are fairly healthy, but they're still at risk of a recurrence, if we can delay that recurrence significantly and enhance survival, we think that there's going to be really robust demand for a therapy like that, especially in indications like colorectal cancer, where today there's really no alternative at that stage.
Yeah. Now we switch to final part, and this is the bank and a little bit the financing. You have kind of after BioNTech's acquisition, maybe 17 billion in cash or something around that. Now the good thing is interest rates have gone up. You get kind of 400 million every year extra, which is maybe not in the planning of you and the analysts. Now, what you are going to do, one is you get from the cancer side, from the vaccine side, still cash flows, which help to finance the normal program, I would say. What are you going to do? And I was a little bit surprised in the call you said, in the R&D call you said, you do an active portfolio management and it creates additional headroom for the company. Now you have great headroom. Does it mean you sell some parts? You make licensing deals? What does it mean? You're phrasing it gives headroom for active portfolio management.
Yeah, so I think that our strategy is to focus on these key assets that where we have a path to late stage studies and path to the market, and to focus on those. And we think a number of these assets, we've talked about some of them today, 327, iNeST, for example, could require significant investment to really reach their full potential. And so I think we're in a very fortunate position to have a capital that we can invest aggressively towards those programs. And so that's what we're going to do. And what I was referring to with creating headroom was really more on the P&L side, right? So we also recognize that at the moment we're just one product. We have one product on the market. Our ambition, our aim is to have multiple products on the market and to have a multi-product revenue stream. And we think if we can do that, we can set the company on a long-term growth trajectory that will be sustainable and cash generative. And that's the aim, is to get into that stage of the company as quickly as we can. And we see that a path to doing that over the next years. And so during this period, this sort of transition period from where we are today to that vision, I think during that time, I think the cash balance will continue to be a value anchor for us, and give us strategic optionality. I think that along the way on some of the non-core programs or programs that I think outside of the top tier, you can expect us to do some partnerships. You can expect us to do to make those tough decisions on what we fund and what we don't fund. And I think you should, I think investors should understand that we are going to be vigorous and sort of rigorous in how we make those assessments. And we really want to channel capital to those programs that we think have the highest potential to impact patients and ultimately create value.
Yeah. Now, a little bit in the market, there's the concern in the financial market, there's the concern that you will show losses at some point of times. Now, nothing special for startup companies, but you are beyond that phase, I would say, far beyond that phase. Now, on the other hand, you capitalize R&D as it's usual, and so it's more the running cost, or if a project fails. Do you expect losses because you have the fixed income, let's say, from the vaccine side? And is there, on a cash flow basis, I'm not concerned at all, but is there something that you say, okay, strategy to avoid losses is possible? Or do you say, no, it doesn't matter. We have a 5-year plan, we have a 10-year plan, and the success finally makes it work, whatever happens in between?
So I think it's somewhere in between those two extremes. So I think we certainly do want to be profitable in the future, but I think we also have this very large, significant opportunity ahead of us with some of the therapies that we've talked about today, like BNT327, that are going to require investment, and so we have to get the balance right. And this year we do expect to have a loss, but we think it's going to be manageable, and we do think that given the cash flow that our COVID vaccine franchise can produce still. We do think that helps offset some of the R&D investment that we're going to make over the next couple of years. And so we have a very attractive economic set for the COVID vaccine franchise that's going to help us get more products to market quicker. And so, the aim is to be a growth company, right? I think BioNTech should be seen as a growth company. I think with multiple product opportunities, we have the aim to have, 10 indications approved by 2030. As an example, to show you the kind of diversification that we think the pipeline can deliver over time, but we're going to have to invest to get there. So it may be the case that we do incur a loss for some years to that point where we can start to have the multiple product revenue stream. But during that period, it's important to us that we still manage the cash flow, manage the balance sheet, and we're confident that we can maintain a strong cash balance capital position on the balance sheet during this transition phase to being a multi-product company.
Perfect. Now, from my point of view, nothing to add. It was a fantastic overview and deep dive, I would even say, in these parts. It was longer than originally planned, but every second was worth of it from my point of view. So thanks a lot, Ryan. Is there anything you would like to add at the end? Special thing. We say thank you in respect to also our viewers to your time you took in these busy times, and thanks a lot, Ryan, for that. And maybe final words to you.
No, I would just say, Andres, thank you very much as well for your time, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your shareholders, and we look forward to further interactions, and I hope we can keep a dialogue going over the coming years.
I'm pretty sure and hopeful on that. And thanks a lot to everybody. And I would say have a great Advent time. Merry Christmas, frohe Weihnachten, and all the best, of course, in the sake of patients and the financial investors. Thanks a lot for that. Great.
Vielen Dank.